everyone, I'm so glad you're joining me today. And for those of you that watched my video last week when I was making a little DIY prairie bonnet, I promised you last week that I was going to do a little video on the window treatments in my house. And I'm just going to be honest with you, most of the rooms in my house, actually all but one, are window treatments that I made myself. And they're very simple. So I wanted to share with you today one of the styles that I use and how simple it is to make. So we'll get into that in just a little bit. But first I want to just kind of show you what I have in each room. And this particular style that I have in here, that I'm in here in my our little family room, our little den where we watch TV. And my favorite, I guess, of all are just the plain off-white linen curtains that you just pull to one side. Okay, the way I made these, it was so simple. I wanted linen curtains, but if you've ever tried to find linen curtains, first of all, they're a little hard to find, and when you do find them, they're very pricey. So one day, Mom and I were at Target, and we were looking at tablecloths, and I saw a tablecloth, and it was made by Threshold. That's a brand that Target sells, and it was 100% linen. And I was like, oh, my wheels got to turning. What? I bet I can make some curtains out of that. Well, sure enough, came home, and the size tablecloth that I bought was a 60-inch by 120-inch. Well, if you cut that in half, you've got two 60-inch squares to make for two windows. So I thought, that sounds simple enough. And the reason I'm telling you all this, I know that now they don't carry that particular tablecloth at Target anymore. They've quit carrying the linen one, and I was so sad when that happened. But you could do that with any kind of tablecloth if you found the fabric that you wanted. You could find something that resembles linen. It doesn't have to be real linen. And so that's why I'm telling you that. But all you do, and I'm going to take these out of here. I'll show you what I've done. Let me see if I can get a better view. Now you can see here that I have a little hook that I've got hanging on the side of my window on the trim. And it's a little hook. The hook has a little hole in it. Actually, my stepdad, Greg, made these for me. But you could probably find these in the curtain department, just some kind of little hook. And all you're going to do, you're going to tie these curtains back and let them hang over that hook. So let me show you how simple that is to do. First, all you need to do to make these curtains with your 60-inch square piece of fabric, two of your edges are already going to be hemmed. So all you have to do is hem either the top and bottom or the sides, whichever you prefer. And then you're just going to make a pocket at the top. You're just going to fold your fabric down and make two seams that makes a pocket for a tension rod to slide in. And this is just a tension rod that I picked up at Walmart. And because I like my curtains to be on the inside of the windows instead of the outside of the windows on my trim, I'd rather have them on the inside of the windows. So once you do that, you're left with a big finished square with a pocket at the top for your tension rod. And then I just start down here. You can see the wrinkles where I have this. I just start down here towards the bottom, and I just take my hand and I just work it all the way up at an angle, grabbing a little fabric as I go until I get all the way to the top up here by this hook. Now here I am. I've got all my fabric gathered in my hand, and then I'm just going to place this over the hook. And there you have it. You've just got and I love the way that it just looks like it swags down and then loops over this little hook. And I think that hook would be, like I said, would be easy to find at any probably drapery department. And then, let me move this chair out of the way. And then what I have down here at the bottom, I don't have blinds in my windows. Of course, we live out in the country, so I really don't have the need for blinds. But to have a little bit of privacy at night, I've just made bottoms for my windows. And again, they're just on a tension rod and very simple to make. Just, fabric that's been hemmed and then added a pocket to. And the way I made these, they have a slit, so I have two pieces. That way I can pull them back during the day. And then at night, I just close them together for some privacy. And they look pretty either way. So that's how I did those curtains. They're pretty simple. So now let's move on to another room and I'll show you the other style curtains that I use, and then we'll do a little quick DIY on how to make those. Now I also wanted to show you I have these same curtains, same style, in here in my living room. I'm in here in the living room. It's so dark in front of this window you probably can't tell what room I'm in. It's dark with the sunlight coming in, but I wanted you to see what these look like if you hang them on a double window. So all I did was just I used one tablecloth for this window. It made two 60-inch by 60-inch pieces. And again, I just hung these on a hook. If you can see the little hook without me taking it down. Just a little black hook. And then just kind of just pulled them over the hooks. But I love the style of these curtains because I think they will go with, you know, your colonial style, primitive style, whatever style you want to use. I think that they work with both. Now, I'm in here in the kitchen, and you can see I've got the same thing on these windows. I've just got a double window in here, and I've used the same style curtain with the hooks. And then I've got a couple of single windows that I did the same thing. This one has come off the hook a little bit. Let's push it back in. And then I used the same thing on this little door that we have that goes out to the deck. I just used, actually I think I just used a piece of domestic, or I can't remember what kind of fabric I used, but it's just long enough, you know, to run the length of the window on that door. And then that way it blends with the rest of the curtains that I have in here in the kitchen. Got the little small one over my kitchen sink. It's made the same way, just shorter. But I love using this color, just the neutral color, because that way whatever color you go with, whatever style, I think it goes really well. Okay, now these curtains here are probably some of my favorites. I've got two rooms that have these kind of curtains. And these curtains, I'll tell you a little bit of how I learned to make these curtains. There's a lady, her name is Linda Babb, and I'm sure that a lot of you have followed her before. She used to have a beautiful picture trail full of pictures of her gorgeous home. And she did a little step-by-step little tutorial years ago on how to make these curtains, that she has these same curtains hanging in her home. Well, I knew I just had to have them because I've admired her home for so many years. And so the way that you make these, they look like they would be a little bit difficult to make, but they're not. They're made in the same way that I was telling you to make the other ones. You can make them any length that you want to make them. You can make them hang as far down in the window as you want to. And the way that I make these, I just buy fabric that's at least 54 inches wide. You wouldn't want to use a 45-inch fabric width because that's just not going to give you enough fullness. I use a 54-inch wide piece of fabric, and usually you can find that style fabric at Joann Fabrics in either the upholstery section, or they have a section called decorator fabrics. And those fabrics are a little heavier cloth and have a wider width. They're usually 54 inches wide. And then all you do to make these are simple. There's no hemming. All you have to do is, let me move this out of the way. On these, I didn't have enough fabric to double it to make the back side look the same, so I just used an off-white, like a Onsberg or domestic. And all I've done, and this is the one that I'm going to give you a little tutorial on how to make. And all you do, these are actually going to be lined. And the way you line something, it would be just like making a pillow. You're just going to sew a big square, you know, and all of your edges won't need to be hemmed because they're going to be inside. You're going to make a big pillow square and turn it right side out. And I'll show you guys how I do this. What gives these curtains this even looking gathering right here, the way you pull them out, because you can see they're not looped over a hook, they're not tied back, they're just hanging there. by themselves. And I thought, how does she do that? So I'll show you guys in the DIY how we do that. It's so simple, and it really makes these hang really pretty. So let's go back to my little craft room that I'm enjoying so much and get started, and I'll show you guys how to make these curtains. Okay, I'm in here in my craft room, and y'all saw these, I'm sure, last week, but these curtains are made just like the curtains from my bedroom, the red curtains we just saw in my bedroom. And what I think I'm going to do this DIY, and I think I'm going to take these down and replace these with some off-white, made the same way, and I'll show you guys how to make them. And I think it'll lighten this room up. These are beautiful. I like these, but they're dark, and I just kind of want a little bit more light coming in this room. So I'm going to take these down after I get these others made, and after I take these down, I'll be able to show you guys a little bit better how we make these. Okay, now we're ready to start this curtain that I showed you. Now again, this is going to be this curtain up here, and we're going to make two of these because I've got this double window. So this would be the equivalent to having two windows. So I'm going to need to make two curtains. So the first thing you're going to need to do is, I usually buy my fabric at Joann Fabrics or Hobby Lobby, and you'll need to make sure that whatever fabric you choose, it needs to be at least 54 inches wide. And then you'll need for each window, if you use 54-inch wide fabric and you want yours to come down about the length that mine come down, and my windows, I have 6-foot windows. So if you have a 5-foot window, that length is still fine. You might want to shorten this a little bit. If you have just like 4-foot windows, you probably wouldn't want it to come down this long. That's totally a preference. That's totally up to you. But for this style of window and the length that I have these, you're going to need 3 yards per window. And what that's going to be, that will be like a 54-inch square. You're going to get a piece of fabric that's 54 inches wide and 54 inches long, which will be your yardage. So you'll need 1.5 yards. And then the reason you're going to need 3 yards is you're going to sew two 54-inch squares together. So I've already cut mine, so I didn't have to put y'all through trying to watch me cut these squares of fabric. But I've got two pieces here that are 54 by 54. And what you're going to need to do is put your right sides together, and then we're just going to sew these up as if you were making a big giant pillow. But you just want to leave enough room to turn this right side out. And so let me dig out my machine. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so now we're ready to start sewing. And like I said, all you're going to do is sew these two 54 by 54 pieces together as if you were making a big pillow. And leave enough, a little space where that you can turn them right side out. All right, so my fabric, like I said, I already had it cut. And I didn't actually go and buy fabric at Joann Fabrics. I had this piece of fabric. It was a big, huge drape, a big pair of drapes that I had bought somewhere that I knew I could make curtains from. So I've just cut mine 54 by 54. So if you see a hemmed edge or whatever, that's because I'm using something that used to be a pair of drapes. But, y'all's fabric won't have this on there. Okay, now I got all sides, 4 sides sewed together, and I've left a small spot to turn the fabric. And usually I like to clip my corners just so that they'll lay better. Okay, so let's just turn this. right side out. A lot of fabric to come back through here. I feel sorry for the little old ladies that all this antique stuff we love so much, all these Windsor chairs, banister back chairs that we love so much. We like to look at them, but if I had to sit here all day long and work or sew, or whew, my back would break. You got to hand it to them. I'm sure that's what they did, among about a million other things. Okay. Just turning this right side out. We're just going to have a big, huge square. We get our little corners poked out. We're just going to whip stitch that little piece where we left it to where you could turn the right side out. We're going to whip stitch that back together, and then we'll iron this real good. And we'll add our pocket to the top that our rod's going to go through. Okay, so here's our big square. All right. I'm going to whip this up real quick. Okay, so here's where I left a hole, or unseamed, so that I could turn this right side out. And I'm just going to whip stitch this up. It would actually look better if you had something that you could just, I think they make, someone left me a comment last week and said that they make like stitch witchery or something where you can just use that instead of a sewing machine to seam your seams together, your fabric together. So it would probably look better if you had something like that instead of trying to whip this together. But I don't have any of that, so I'm just going to whip this together. I just always think that if you really want to change the look of a room, change your curtains. Change your rug or change your curtains, and that can do wonders for getting a different look in your room. My favorite things to decorate with are curtains, rugs, and chairs. I love chairs. Because again, a chair can change the whole look of a room. I think I've told you guys that before, but it really does work. I'm going to dig my iron out, and we're going to iron this really good. And then we're going to put our pocket. We're going to make a little pocket to fit our curtain rod. So let me get my iron. Sure have been enjoying seeing the pictures that some of you have sent me of the bonnets that you made from my little DIY last week. They all look so pretty, and they look good where you guys have them hanging. Okay, here's our finished big huge square. Now all we need to do is make a pocket for our curtain rod. Okay, so we're getting ready to make our pocket for this curtain. This is the curtain rod. It's just a tension rod that just has tension on it so you can squeeze it inside your window. So what we're going to do to make our pocket, our rod is going to come through the curtain here at the top, and you want about 1.5 inches. You want to come down about 1.5 inches to make your first seam for the pocket. Then we'll come down right at 2 inches more to make the actual pocket. So we're going to have a seam about right here, and that's going to leave like a little ruffle at the top. And then we're going to have another seam about right here to slide our pocket through. So I'm going to come down about 1.5 inches. I'm going to start seaming about right here to leave a little bit of the ruffle. And now we've got our first seam in. That's going to make our little ruffle at the top once we put our little rod in there. But we've got to make a second seam here for the rod to rest in. So we're going to come down about 1 3/4 inches down is what I'm going to work with, 1 3/4 inches. And sometimes it's nice if you're sewing. Sometimes what I like to do, if I'm trying to come down 1 3/4 inches or 2 inches, I'll measure out what that needs to be, and then I will put me a little piece of tape over here as a guide, so that when I'm running my fabric through here, I'll stay along the edge of that. I'll stay along the edge of that tape, so that you can make sure, instead of having to measure every little bit, just a quicker way. It'll be like a little guide. So I'm going to get me a piece of tape and run it right along through here. So now what you're going to need to do is get you a little seam ripper or a little razor blade and just cut that seam right there where we sewed it up. We're going to need to cut that seam open so we can get our curtain rod through there. So I've just decided to use just a little seam ripper, and once you get that first seam ripped, it'll just pull right apart. There we go. I've got that one open. Our curtain rod will go just right in there. Okay, I've gotten both curtains sewed up for each side of my double window, and I've laid out the first one here on this table. And what we're going to do, I'm going to take, these are called drapery rings. Let me give you a close-up of that. They're just little bitty clear rings. And then what we're going to do, we're going to sew some of these onto the back side of our curtain. So I'm going to tell you where to place these rings. Okay, where we're going to put our first ring, we're going to come down from the top of the curtain, and this is your top, where your curtain rod's going to go. From the top of the curtain, we're going to come down 14 inches. It should be right here, and then we're going to come over 8 inches. Come down 14 and over 8. So here's 8. Let's make sure we're down 14. Go down. Okay, I'm going to put a little bitty dot right here. That's going to be our first ring. Okay, now what we're going to do is go to the other end of this fabric to put our last one, and then we're going to put them at a diagonal all the way across this. So we're going to go to this other corner. Let me make sure you can see. And on this corner, we're going to come up 9 inches from the bottom. Come up 9 inches, and we're going to put one of the rings right here, not right on the edge, but about almost an inch, half inch, between half inch and an inch away from the edge. Okay, now, okay, so here's our first ring. Now what we're going to do is get you a ruler, a long yardstick, and let's see, that's our first dot, and let's find our last dot. And what this is going to do, like I was showing you guys earlier when I was gathering up the fabric and showing you how it lays over that hook on those curtains to make them swag back. Well, when you put these little hooks, these little round drapery rings all the way up through this at a diagonal, then what we're going to do after we get those little hooks sewed on, we're going to run either some fishing wire or a piece of string, whatever you have, and we'll run string through each one of those loops, and then we'll draw them up and tie it off, and then that's how that fabric gets gathered. So let's start right here and find our first. There's our first one. So we kind of just want to do this I wish I had a bigger table here. It'd be easier to work with. But what we want to do is start with the first dot, and we want to come up every 8 inches is where you're going to put one of those drapery rings. So that's 1, 2. Now let's put one from here. And I'm looking at my first dot. I want to make sure that I'm going to be just about in line with that one when I finish. So I'm going to put one right here. And then the next one, see, we're just right in line. I'm going to put one right here. And they're working out to be about every 8 inches. And then another one here. And this one, let's see here. And it doesn't have to be perfect how far apart they are. You just want these little drapery rings running diagonal up your curtain so that you can gather them up. Okay, so now take your first little ring and make sure you go through both pieces of the fabric, and you only have to go around it just a few times, just enough to hold that little hook in place. And you're only going to sew it in one place because you kind of want your little hook to be free floating around, because we're going to run our cord up through this little ring. So let's that should be just enough. Let me just finish it off. Okay. Now let's do our next one. here we go. We've got all of our little rings sewed on here. Now I just need to get some string, and I'll show you how we'll attach this string to gather this up. Let me run get some string. Okay, I got some. This is some very fine, very thin. I think this is just like jute string, but it's not thick. It's pretty thin. So I'm just gonna, what we're gonna do, start with your first hole here. Just let me roll me some off of here. I'm just gonna roll a little extra. Won't need near this much, but I want to make sure that while I'm hanging it, it doesn't come unthreaded out of these rings. All right, so I'm just going to secure it on this first ring. I'm just going to tie it. Just tie a knot. Okay, and now I'm just going to thread it through these other rings. Okay, now I'm just going to leave that like that, and I'm going to do my second curtain, and then we'll hang them on the curtain rod, and I'll show you how we pull those up for the gathers. Now on the second curtain, they're going to be going facing each other, so I got to make sure that I run my little circles up the opposite direction, because we want to make sure our gathering is pulling in from the right, side on each curtain. So make sure you pay attention to that when you're making curtains. Decide which way you want your swag to go so that you'll know which side to angle your circles on. I hope I'm making sense. It's just that, you want to make sure that you're, in one room you may want your angle coming one way, and in the other window on another wall you want it to run the opposite way. So just make sure you put a little thought into how you need to gather up those curtains and place your circles accordingly. Okay, so I've got these all ready to hang. I've got the little curtain rings all hung on the back, and all we've got to do is hang them and then draw up our string to make them gather. So I'll show you how we do that. And I'm just using a long curtain rod that I got from Walmart, a tension rod. Okay, just kind of get it on here even. All right, now let's add our second one. All right, now we've got them on our rod. Now, we'll have to, I usually put a little cup hook up here to give this a little support, and then I'll just put a little wire here to hold this up so that rod won't sag, because these are kind of heavy. So let me get my wire. Okay, now we've got them all hung, got them pretty even across there. Now the fun part. What we're going to do, I'm going to take this string and I'm just going to start pulling the slack out of this string from down here at our bottom thing. And just as you pull it, just push this up, and you can see. And when you get it to the point that you like it, because we can go a little bit further because all right. I think that looks good. And then all you want to do is secure it into the first loop. Tie it back in that first loop. Okay, that's one side. And let's cut off the slack. All right, now let's do this side. Again, we're just going to start pulling the slack out on this string. Mine came unthreaded out of that last loop. Just start pushing it up. Okay. Make sure that looks about even with the other side. That's about right. And then tie this one off. Cut off our slack, our string. All right. Now here's a finished view of the curtains. What they look like all hung up in the daytime. And I'm really happy with them. I think they turned out really pretty. I kind of like the lighter curtains in here. The dark were pretty, but I don't know. I think I'm just ready for a little bit lighter color. I think it'll let a little bit more light in here. It'll just be a little brighter in here. So anyway, I hope that you guys will attempt this, and it's not a hard project. It's just a little bit time consuming, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll just see you guys in the next one.